The black SUVs stopped so hard the tires cried on the wet sand. Doors opened at once. Men in dark suits stepped out, eyes sharp, hands on their earpieces. Neighbors froze with bowls of gari and wet laundry in their hands. The biggest SUV's door swung wide, and a tall man in a navy suit came down, anger and fear mixing on his face like thunder and lightning. Everyone whispered the same name, Henry Williams, a billionaire. In our dusty compound, looking for someone. He lifted his eyes to the old bungalow with a broken porch light, the one house that still smelled like old books and warm soap. "Where is my mother?" he asked, voice calm but heavy. His gaze landed on Melinda, standing in the doorway, rain on her eyelashes, jacket around her shoulders, heart beating fast. She gripped the doorframe. Inside, an 80-year-old woman sat on the wooden chair in the small living room, a blue lace wrapper around her legs and a borrowed jacket over her shoulders. A steaming mug of tea waited beside bread on a plate. The woman's hands shook, but her eyes were clear now. Melinda swallowed. She was only a waitress. She had no idea why a billionaire was at her door. "Sir," she said, voice careful and small. "She's inside." Henry took one step toward Melinda, and everything froze. Hours earlier, the sky had looked like a grey blanket pulled low over Lagos. Melinda left the restaurant with tired feet and a half-broken umbrella that leaned like a bent arm. She had counted her tips twice and smiled anyway. It was enough for tomorrow's beans and kerosene. The rain started slow, tapping her umbrella like fingers on a drum. The road shone like glass, and people hurried home, shoulders tight, eyes down. That was when she saw the old woman. She was on a wooden bench by the bus stop, curls of grey peeking from a head tie. Her blue lace wrapper was wet and heavy. Shivers ran through her body like tiny insects, and when her lips moved, no sound came out. People walked past. Some looked, most didn't. The rain grew loud. Melinda slowed. Her late mother's voice rose in her heart like a warm hand. "If you can help, help, even when no one is watching." "Ma," Melinda said, kneeling so her eyes were level with the woman's. "Let me help you, please." She held the umbrella over both of them, stretching her arm until rain slid cold down her sleeve. The woman tried to speak. Only a soft hiss of air came out. She clutched her belly as if guarding it from the wind. "Come," Melinda said. "My house is close." It wasn't close. It was a full 10-minute walk on muddy ground. But the word close can be like a hand to hold when your legs are tired and your heart is scared. So Melinda made it true. She braced the umbrella, slipped her free arm around the woman, and they moved together, slow, careful steps, rain pattering, cars hissing by. They reached the old bungalow her parents built before the crash that took them. Paint peeled from the walls like old stickers. But inside it was clean, and it smelled like home. Melinda guided the woman to the living room, sat her on the wooden chair, and, without thinking, took off her only thick jacket and wrapped it around the frail shoulders. The woman's eyes filled. She tried again to speak. Only tears came. "It's okay," Melinda said. "Don't talk yet." She ran to the tiny kitchen. Matches scratched. The stove coughed to life. She set water to boil and glanced at the bread she had saved for breakfast. Her stomach pinched. She sliced it anyway and set the pieces on a small blue plate with tiny cracks like spiderwebs. The kettle whistled. She stirred the tea and added milk and sugar with a steady hand, like her mother used to. Then she did something that would stay with everyone who saw it the next day. She carried the tray into the living room, went down on her knees on the wet floor by the woman's feet, and lifted the mug with both hands like it was something holy. "Careful, it's hot," Melinda said. Her voice was sweet but strong. She waited until the woman's hands around the mug stopped shaking. Then she leaned in and adjusted the jacket on the older woman's shoulders, pulling it closer at the neck so the heat stayed in. Her fingers were gentle, her eyes were soft and sure. The woman tried to speak again. This time, a whisper came. "Thank you," Melinda smiled. "You're safe here." Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the clock ticked. The woman ate the bread in tiny, careful pieces. After a while, her head tilted back against the chair, and her breath became steady. Sleep, like a blanket, covered her. Melinda watched for a long time. She thought of the crash. She thought of the hospital hallways and the empty house afterward. She thought of her dream to be a doctor and how far it felt, like a cloud you could see but never touch. Then she wiped the floor where her knees had been, turned off the lights, and let the rain finish singing the night to sleep. Morning came with the smell of wet dust and the cries of a hawker selling akara. The old woman woke slowly. Sunlight slid in through the slanted blinds and landed on her face like a shy friend. "How do you feel?" Melinda asked, holding a clean towel and a fresh wrapper from the small trunk under her bed. The woman looked at her for a long time. Tears crowded her eyes again, but this time they didn't fall from fear. They fell from relief. "My name is Agnes," she said, voice thin but steady. "People call me Madam Agnes." "That's a beautiful name," Melinda said, smiling. Agnes took a shaky breath. "I was taken last night. 2 men, right in front of my son's gate. They took my phone, my bag. They pushed me into a car. I prayed with all my strength. Maybe the rain scared them. Maybe God tired them. They dropped me near the market. I didn't know where to go." Melinda's throat tightened. She set the towel aside and brought the woman water. "You're safe now." Agnes nodded. "What is your name, my child?" "Melinda." Agnes touched her hand. "Melinda, you saved me." The word saved sat in the room, bright as a new coin. Agnes looked around, eyes catching on the photo of Melinda's parents by the door, 2 smiling faces frozen in a sunlit day. "Are these your parents?" "Yes," Melinda said softly. "They died years ago. I am sorry." Agnes swallowed. May I call my son? He will be looking for me. He must be breaking." "Of course." Melinda brought her small phone. The screen had a crack like lightning. "Tell me his number," Agnes told her. Melinda typed. The phone rang. The voice that answered was tight as a wound. "Hello? Henry," Agnes said. The word trembled. "It's me." There was a breath on the line that sounded like someone dropping a heavy bag. "Mother." "I'm safe," Agnes said, eyes closing. "I'm safe. Where are you?" he asked. Agnes looked at Melinda. Melinda told her the address. Henry repeated it under his breath, like a prayer he didn't want to forget. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." The call ended. The room felt different, like a drum after the first strike. Melinda's hands shook. She set the phone down and smiled to hide it. "More tea?" "Yes," Agnes said, smiling back. "With plenty milk." Like last night. They both laughed a little, and the room became warm again. But outside, the compound was waking up with whispers. A Kike driver told a vulcanizer who told the woman making puff-puff by the corner that something big was coming. Children pressed faces to fences. An Okada rider slowed and pointed. Even the mango tree seemed to lean in. Then, the black SUVs arrived. The first high moment was loud, the engines, the doors, the hush that fell after. The second was quiet Henry's face when he stepped out and saw the old bungalow. Something in him bent, like he wanted to run, and also didn't trust his legs. Melinda stood in the door again, the jacket now on her own shoulders because the morning had turned a little cold. She looked small, but there was a steady light in her eyes that had not gone since last night. Henry climbed the steps. 2 guards stayed back. 2 came up behind him. "Sir," Melinda said, stepping aside. "She's here." He walked in. He stopped. His mother looked up at him from the wooden chair, her blue lace wrapper neat now, the borrowed jacket tied at the front. For a heartbeat, both of them were 10 years younger. Then the moment broke. Henry dropped to his knees and took his mother's hands, pressing them to his forehead. "Mother," he whispered. "Mother." Agnes smiled with wet eyes. "I'm fine." Henry looked up. "Who helped you?" Agnes turned, and her smile widened. "She did." Henry stood. He faced Melinda fully for the first time. She felt like a candle that someone had just lit. Warm, small, bright, and a little surprised to be glowing. "How did you find her?" he asked. Melinda told him about the rain, the bus stop, the shaky steps, the tea, the bread, the jacket. She kept it simple, because the truth did not need decoration. When she reached the part where she knelt to adjust the jacket, Agnes began to cry, and Henry's jaw tightened again, but in a different way. When Melinda finished, the room was quiet. Henry took a breath that sounded like a decision. "Melinda," he said, and the way he said her name made the neighbors outside hold theirs. "Pack your bags and follow us." The guards looked up. Agnes's hands flew to her mouth. Melinda's fingers went numb. And the compound, the rain, the city, everything held still, waiting to see what would happen next. For a moment, the air in Melinda's small living room felt too heavy for words. Madame Agnes reached for her son's arm, but Henry didn't move. He just stared at Melinda, at her simple clothes, still damp from the morning dew, at the worry lines on her young face, and the trembling fingers she hid behind her back. She wasn't used to men like him, tall, powerful, with a voice that could fill a room even when he spoke softly. "Pack your things," Henry said again, his tone firm but not harsh. "You're coming with us." Melinda blinked, uncertain she heard right. "Sir, I don't understand." Henry took a step closer. "You helped my mother when everyone else walked past her. You didn't ask who she was. You just helped. I won't forget that." But, Madame Agnes interrupted gently. Her voice was soft, but it carried power, the kind that only comes from age and grace. "You saved my life, child. If not for you, I might not be here today. My son wants to thank you properly." Melinda looked around her little home, the cracked mirror on the wall, her parents' photo, the wooden table with one leg shorter than the others. It was all she had left of them. "I can't just leave," she said quietly. "This is my home." Henry studied her for a moment. "Then let me fix it," he said. "Let me help you the same way you helped my mother." Before she could respond, the sound of the SUV engines outside grew louder. The guards were shifting, ready to move. Curious neighbors pressed against their windows, whispering her name. Madame Agnes reached for Melinda's hands, her fingers trembling but warm. "Please, my dear," she said. "You've done enough alone. Let someone else carry the burden for once." Something in the old woman's eyes, kindness, pain, gratitude, made it impossible for Melinda to refuse. She nodded slowly. "Let me pack my bag," she whispered. Minutes later, she stepped out with a small black bag, its zipper half broken, filled with her few clothes and her mother's scarf. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet, reflecting the SUVs like black mirrors. As Melinda followed Henry and Madame Agnes to the car, the whole neighborhood watched. Children pointed. Some adults smiled. Others looked away, unsure what to think. Inside the car, the scent of leather and perfume filled the air. Melinda had never sat in anything so clean or quiet. She could see her reflection in the tinted glass. She looked like someone else. Madame Agnes smiled at her from the opposite seat. "You're safe now." For the first time in years, Melinda allowed herself to believe it. The Williams mansion in Leckie looked like something out of a dream. Tall white pillars framed the entrance, and glass walls shimmered in the sunlight. Guards opened the gates as the convoy rolled in. The moment the car stopped, workers and maids rushed forward, their faces full of surprise and joy. "Madam, you're back." They helped Madame Agnes out of the car carefully. She smiled at them, then looked back at Melinda. "Stay close to me." Melinda followed, her heart racing. The marble floor felt cold under her worn shoes. Chandeliers glittered above her like tiny suns. Everything was spotless, quiet, and strange. Henry turned to her. "From today," he said, "you're not going back to that old house. You'll stay here until we make other arrangements." Melinda's lips parted. "Sir, I've made up my mind," he interrupted. "And before you say you can't accept it, I've already called the university board. You said you wanted to be a doctor." Melinda froze. "How did you—" "My mother told me," Henry said. "You could have left her there to die. You didn't. That tells me you have the kind of heart a doctor needs." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't pay you back, sir." Henry gave a faint smile. "You already have." He turned to one of his assistants. "Prepare a guest room for her, and make sure she's comfortable. Tomorrow I want her enrollment forms for Lagos State University on my desk." Melinda gasped. "Tomorrow?" Henry nodded. "Tomorrow." That night, Melinda sat in her new room, a wide, soft space with white curtains that danced with the wind. The bed felt too soft, the silence too deep. She stood by the window, watching the rain return in silver sheets. Downstairs, lights glowed in the garden. Henry and Madame Agnes were talking under the veranda. Their shadows stretched long across the wet ground. Melinda pressed her palm to the glass. She whispered, "Thank you, God." But as her eyes drifted to the far end of the compound, she saw something, a man in a black jacket near the gate, staring toward the mansion. His face was hidden by the rain, but something about the stillness in his stance made her uneasy. She blinked. The man turned and disappeared behind the guard post. Melinda's heart thudded. Who was he? A worker? A reporter? Someone from the kidnapping? She didn't know. But one thing was certain, her story was only beginning. Because by morning, the same act of kindness that saved Madame Agnes's life would draw Melinda into a world she never imagined, a world of power, secrets, and unexpected love. And in that world, one small act of compassion would soon demand the greatest test of her heart. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Williams mansion, lighting the marble floors in soft gold. The smell of fresh bread and coffee floated through the air. For a few seconds, Melinda forgot where she was until she opened her eyes and saw the tall white ceiling above her, the silk curtains, and the folded uniform laid on the chair beside her bed. It wasn't a dream. She was still here. She sat up slowly, her heart full. The events of the past 24 hours ran through her mind. The rain, the stranger, the tea, the convoy. And now, this. A gentle knock came at the door. "Come in," Melinda said softly. A maid, wearing a neat navy uniform, stepped inside with a bright smile. "Good morning, Ma. Madame Agnes and Sir Henry are waiting for you downstairs. Breakfast is ready." Melinda blinked. "Ma?" No one had ever called her that before. She smiled shyly and nodded. "I'll be right there." She washed her face, brushed her hair into a ponytail, and wore the simple blue gown the maid had ironed for her. Her mother used to say, "Kindness shines brighter than any gold." Today, Melinda hoped her kindness was enough to keep her brave. When she entered the dining room, she froze. The table stretched almost the length of her old living room. Silver dishes shimmered, fruits gleamed, and a crystal chandelier threw tiny rainbows across the floor. Henry looked up from his tablet and smiled faintly. "Good morning, Melinda." "Good morning, sir," she replied, still too nervous to sit. "Sit down," Madame Agnes said warmly. "You're part of this home now." Melinda obeyed, her fingers fidgeting on her lap. Henry set his tablet aside. "I made a few calls last night. You've been accepted into Lagos State University. You'll begin the new semester next month. Everything, tuition, housing, books will be taken care of." Melinda's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you enough." Henry smiled gently. "Don't thank me. You earned it. Just promise me one thing, never lose the heart that made you stop for a stranger in the rain." Her throat tightened. She nodded. "I promise." Madame Agnes touched Melinda's hand. "You remind me of myself when I was your age, always trying to fix the world with kindness. That kind of heart is rare." Tears threatened to spill from Melinda's eyes, but she blinked them back. She wanted to speak, to say something meaningful. But just then, a tall, handsome young man entered the room about Melinda's age, maybe a little older. He wore a grey sweatshirt, earphones dangling around his neck, and his smile was confident, bright, the kind that filled a room. "Jeremy," Madame Agnes said joyfully, "you didn't tell us you were flying in." Jeremy grinned, walking over to hug her. "Wanted to surprise you, Grandma. You always said I never visit enough." Melinda sat up straighter. "Grandson?" Henry rose from his seat. "Welcome home, son." "Son." Melinda's heart skipped. "This is Henry's son?" Jeremy turned toward her. His gaze landed on her face and stayed there for a second too long. "And who's this?" he asked with an easy smile. "This is Melinda," Henry said. "She's the reason your grandmother is alive." Jeremy blinked. "Wait, she found Grandma?" Madame Agnes nodded. "If not for her, I'd still be out there somewhere. Or worse." Jeremy's playful smile softened. He looked at Melinda again, his eyes now gentle. "Then I guess I owe you the world." Melinda felt her cheeks warm. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "I just did what anyone should do." Jeremy tilted his head slightly. "Then I guess there aren't many people like you left." His words hung in the air like something fragile and bright. Henry cleared his throat. "Jeremy, help her settle in later. Show her around. She'll be starting school soon, and she could use a friend." "Of course," Jeremy said. "My pleasure." The day passed like a dream. Jeremy took Melinda through the mansion, the library, the garden with white lilies, the art gallery filled with portraits of people long gone. "You'll get used to it," Jeremy said as they walked by the poolside. "My father loves big things. Big house, big plans, big heart." Melinda smiled. "He's been too kind to me already." Jeremy shrugged. "You deserve it." Grandma's been smiling all morning, something she hasn't done in years. They sat on the garden bench. The air smelled like flowers and rain. For a moment, neither spoke. Melinda looked at the clear blue pool, and Jeremy watched her, quiet and thoughtful. "You really walked home in the rain with her?" he finally asked. "Yes." Melinda nodded. "I just couldn't leave her there. She looked lost." Jeremy smiled. "Most people would have kept walking." "I know." She sighed. "But I've been lost before too. I know what it feels like." He turned his head slowly toward her. "I think I just found the most genuine person I've ever met." "Oh, Ma." Melinda laughed softly. "Don't flatter me." "It's not flattery," he said, smiling back. "It's the truth." For a brief moment, their eyes met, and neither looked away. Later that night, Melinda returned to her room with her heart fluttering in ways she couldn't explain. She looked out her window again, remembering the mysterious man she'd seen the night before near the gate. But this time, she didn't see anyone. The compound was quiet. The guards were at their post. Still, something in her heart told her the story wasn't over. Because just as she turned away from the window, her phone vibrated on the table, a number she didn't recognize, flashing across the screen. She hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then a low male voice whispered, "Stay away from the Williams family, before it's too late." Melinda froze, her heart pounding. "Who is this?" But the line went dead. She stood still, the phone trembling in her hand, her reflection staring back at her from the window. Outside, thunder rumbled again in the distance, as if the same rain that brought kindness was warning her that something dark was coming. The night's thunder faded, but the echo of that voice still trembled inside Melinda's chest. Stay away from the Williams family before it's too late. She didn't sleep. Every creak in the mansion, every soft footstep in the hallway made her heart race. By dawn, she sat by the window, watching the rain-washed compound glisten under a grey sky. Who could it be? A prank call? Or someone from Madame Agnes's kidnapping? When she stepped out of her room, the mansion already hummed with morning life. Workers moved quietly. The smell of coffee drifted through the air. She forced a smile, trying to act normal, but the fear wouldn't leave. At breakfast, Henry looked up from a newspaper. "You look pale, Melinda. Are you all right?" "Yes, sir. Just didn't sleep much," she replied quickly. Madame Agnes reached over, concern deep in her eyes. "Was the bed uncomfortable?" "No, Ma," Melinda said softly. "It was perfect." Jeremy glanced at her from across the table. He could tell she was hiding something. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. After breakfast, Henry left for his office downtown. Jeremy was supposed to drive him, but decided to stay back. "I'll take Grandma to her checkup later," he said, earning a teasing look from his father. When the SUV convoy drove off, the mansion grew quieter. Jeremy waited until the gates closed, then turned to Melinda. "You sure you're okay?" She hesitated. "Someone called me last night." Jeremy frowned. "Who?" "I don't know. The number wasn't saved. They told me to stay away from your family, that something bad would happen if I didn't." Jeremy's jaw tightened. "What? Did they say anything else?" "No. They just hung up." Jeremy stood. "You should have told my father. I didn't want to cause panic," Melinda said, voice trembling. "Your grandmother just recovered. I didn't want to worry her." Jeremy paced. "This could be connected to the kidnapping." Melinda's heart skipped. "You think they're still after her?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe they're after my dad. He's made powerful enemies in business. Sometimes I think he keeps more secrets than he admits. If you have to stop, Tig." He turned to her, his expression softening. "But one thing's certain, you're not safe if someone's targeting us." Melinda folded her arms. "I can't just walk away after everything your family's done for me." Jeremy looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you're staying close to me from now on. No arguments." She smiled faintly. "Yes, Dr. Jeremy." He grinned. "Not a doctor yet, but soon." Their laughter broke the tension, and for a brief moment, the mansion felt like home again. Later that afternoon, they took Madame Agnes to the hospital for a checkup. She was stronger now, walking with only a cane. The doctors were amazed at her recovery. "Your blood pressure is perfect," the nurse said with a smile. Madame Agnes beamed. "I told you I'd live long enough to see my grandson get married." Jeremy laughed. "Grandma, don't start matchmaking already." But Madame Agnes only smiled at Melinda. "I'm just saying some blessings come in human form." Melinda blushed and looked away. After the appointment, they stopped at a small restaurant on the island for lunch. The warm chatter of people, the smell of stew and jollof rice, it felt ordinary, human. As they ate, Melinda's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Her hands trembled. She showed it to Jeremy. "Answer on speaker," he said. She pressed the green button. "Hello?" Static. Then a whisper. "You didn't listen." Jeremy snatched the phone. "Who is this?" But the line cut again. A cold wave swept over Melinda. The restaurant suddenly felt smaller, darker. Jeremy stood and looked around, scanning the faces of strangers. "Let's go," he said sharply. Back at the mansion, the guards were already on alert. Henry had been informed. He returned home earlier than usual, his face tight with worry. "From now on," he said, "nobody goes anywhere alone. Agnes stays with her nurse. Jeremy, you take charge of security rotation. Melinda." He paused, his tone softening. "Stay inside the house until I say otherwise." "Yes, sir," she said quietly. That night, Jeremy came to check on her. He found her sitting on the balcony, hugging her knees, staring at the stars. "You shouldn't be out here," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "I couldn't sleep." Jeremy leaned on the railing beside her. "Neither could I." For a while, they said nothing. The air was calm. The garden lights glowed softly below. "Do you think they'll come back for your grandmother?" Melinda asked. Jeremy sighed. "I don't know, but I won't let them touch her, or you." She turned to him. "Why me?" He looked into her eyes. "Because you're part of this family now, whether you like it or not." Their eyes held a quiet, deep connection that neither of them spoke about. But before either could say another word, a noise came from below. A shadow moved across the garden. Jeremy froze. "Stay here." He rushed downstairs while Melinda stood at the balcony. Her breath caught. The lights in the compound flickered once, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. "Jeremy?" she called out. No answer. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her phone and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, just enough for her to see the garden, and there, near the gate, stood the same man in the black jacket from that first night. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Another man stood beside him, holding something long and shiny, a weapon. Melinda's scream tore through the night. Guards ran out instantly, flashlights flashing. Jeremy appeared, shouting orders. Henry rushed from the study. Madame Agnes screamed from upstairs. The men at the gate turned and fled into the darkness before the guards could reach them. When calm finally returned, Henry looked at Melinda with horror. "You saw them?" She nodded, tears rolling down her face. "The same man I saw before." Henry clenched his fists. "They weren't after her this time," he said coldly. "They were watching you." Melinda's world tilted. "Me?" Jeremy stepped closer, gripping her shoulders gently. "You're not leaving my sight again, do you hear me?" Melinda's lips trembled. "Why would they be after me? I didn't do anything." Henry turned away, his face darkening with a thought he didn't share. Because deep down, he knew something he hadn't told anyone, not even his son. The night Madame Agnes was kidnapped, the criminals had demanded something. Something only Henry had access to, a file containing powerful secrets about several business rivals. He had refused to give it up. Now, looking at Melinda's frightened eyes, a terrible possibility struck him like lightning. Maybe those men believed she knew something. Maybe they thought she was the key to finding that file. And if that was true, then Melinda wasn't just the girl who saved his mother. She had just become the target of a dangerous hunt. The following morning broke heavy with tension. The mansion that once hummed with quiet peace now felt like a fortress under siege. Security men moved around with radios crackling. The gates stayed locked, and every sound outside made someone look twice. Melinda sat on the couch beside Madame Agnes, who gently rubbed her hands as if to ease her fear. Jeremy stood by the window, scanning the compound for movement. Henry was on a call, his voice firm but calm. "Yes, Inspector, I want full surveillance footage of last night. They were professionals. I need to know who sent them." He ended the call and turned toward Melinda, his expression softer. "You're safe here, Melinda. I promise you that." She nodded, though her voice trembled. "But why me, sir? Why would anyone want to hurt me?" Henry sighed and sank into a chair. "It's not you they want. It's what they think, you know. Madame Agnes frowned. Henry, explain. Henry hesitated, then said quietly, "The night you were taken, mother, they demanded I give them a classified file, one that could destroy several powerful companies. I refused. They must believe Melinda has something to do with it." Jeremy's jaw tightened. "Then we need to hand it to the police and end this now." Henry shook his head. "If it falls into the wrong hands, innocent people will be ruined. We'll handle it carefully." Madame Agnes sighed, looking from her son to Melinda. All this because she chose kindness. Melinda's eyes welled. "If I cause trouble, maybe I should leave." "Don't you dare," Henry interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "You didn't cause this. You saved my mother. Whatever danger follows, we'll face it together." "It's not wait." Jeremy crossed the room and crouched in front of her, his eyes sincere. "You're part of this family now, and families protect each other." Madame Agnes smiled through her tears. "That's my grandson." Later that evening, the rain returned, soft and slow. Melinda stood by the window, watching it fall. It reminded her of that first night, the night she met Madame Agnes, cold and alone by the road. So much had changed since then. A knock came at the door. Jeremy entered, dressed in a dark jacket. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" "How kindness can change everything," she said softly. "Sometimes, I wonder why I stopped that night. What if I had just walked past?" Jeremy stepped closer. "Then I wouldn't have met you." She turned to face him, her heartbeat quickening. "Jeremy." He smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I'm not saying this because of what's happening. I'm saying it because it's true. From the moment I saw you with Grandma, I knew you were different." Before she could answer, the power flickered once, twice, then went off completely. Jeremy frowned. "Stay here. Please don't go," Melinda whispered. But he was already heading for the hallway, flashlight in hand. Moments later, shouts erupted from outside. Guards yelling, tires screeching. Melinda rushed to the balcony. Through the rain, she saw 3 masked men trying to scale the fence. But this time, the security was ready. A short burst of gunfire echoed, followed by a loud crash. The men fled toward the road, disappearing into the storm. Henry appeared behind her, breath heavy. "They're gone. The police are chasing them now." Melinda turned, tears streaking her face. "They won't stop, will they?" Henry looked out into the rain. "People like that never do until you give them nothing left to take." He looked back at her, his expression resolute. "It's time to end this." The next morning, Henry drove to the state police headquarters with Jeremy by his side. They carried the encrypted hard drive that held the file, the same one the kidnappers had wanted. After a long meeting with the authorities, they handed it over for investigation. When they returned home that evening, a sense of calm finally began to settle over the house. The police assured them the men had been captured near the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. One of them confessed to everything they had targeted, Madame Agnes first, then Melinda, believing she was Henry's secret link to the file. The nightmare was over. A month passed. The rain gave way to warm sunlight, and life slowly returned to normal. Melinda began her first semester at Lagos State University. She visited the mansion often, spending evenings chatting with Madame Agnes and helping with charity plans. One afternoon, Jeremy returned from London after completing his final exams. When he saw Melinda again, standing in the garden where they once sat months ago, he smiled. "Still watching the lilies?" he teased. She turned, laughing softly. "Still teasing?" He walked closer, his heart pounding. "Not this time." She blinked. "Then what?" Jeremy knelt down on one knee. The world around them seemed to hold its breath. "I realized something while I was away," he said, voice trembling. "The night you saved my grandmother, you didn't just change her life, you changed all of ours. You reminded me what real love looks like. So Melinda, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes before she could speak. She nodded, unable to stop smiling. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Madame Agnes, who had been watching from the balcony, clapped her hands joyfully. "God is good," she cried. Henry smiled quietly beside her. "Your kindness finally came home, mother." Months later, their wedding filled the entire city with joy. Guests from all over Nigeria attended. Madame Agnes walked Melinda down the aisle, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Jeremy waited at the altar, eyes glistening with love. When the priest declared them husband and wife, cheers erupted. Henry hugged his mother tightly. "You raised me well," he whispered. "And Melinda proved it," she replied. After the ceremony, Melinda stood beside Jeremy as they looked out over the sea from the reception terrace. "Do you remember that night?" he asked softly. She nodded. "The rain, the umbrella, the bread, the tea, and the kindness that started it all," Jeremy said, holding her hand. "It's funny you gave a stranger a home, and in return, found one of your own." She smiled, eyes glimmering. Kindness always finds its way back. Years passed. Melinda became a respected medical doctor. Jeremy took charge of the Williams Foundation. Together, they built a charity home in honor of Melinda's late parents, the Grace and Daniel Foundation, where less privileged children received free education and healthcare. Every year, on the anniversary of that rainy night, Melinda visited the spot where she found Madame Agnes. She would stand quietly under her umbrella, whisper a prayer of gratitude, and smile at the memory that changed her life. And on her daughter Sandra's 5th birthday, when Sandra asked, "Mommy, why do you always help people you don't know?" Melinda knelt, kissed her forehead, and said, "Because once I helped a stranger, and it led me home." The child smiled, understanding more than words could tell. And somewhere beyond the clouds, Melinda knew her late parents were smiling, too proud that their daughter's kindness had rewritten destiny itself. If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.